Hey, g'day, boys and girls, shillers and blokes. My name is Johannes Brixton, and welcome to my crib. This is the living room. I got living for me and living for the kids. Down here's the trophy room, my room, and the bathroom, while up here's the kitchen, the library, literally nothing, and fish. Was that amity grabbing enough for you? Well, I hope so at least, else I'd make a bad tank.
Bazinga!
Alright, that's enough with the jokes, sorry. I want to try keeping my viewer retention high at the start of this video since I imagine my usual audience isn't going to be watching this one, so hopefully that works. I've built my channel up thus far off primarily Monster Hunter content, however, since I started making videos for YouTube, I have been using my Warrior of Light as the channel avatar, so I personally feel a Final Fantasy XIV video has been long overdue. And so with Dawntrail right around the corner, I wanted to try making a video documenting my thoughts and feelings on the Endwalker expansion while it is still current content. Let me first preface this by saying I love Final Fantasy XIV almost as much as I love the Monster Hunter series. I started FF14 about 6.5 years ago, coming directly off the back of Monster Hunter World, and not because of the collaboration between them either. That actually happened while I was already well into Heavensward, and I would have liked to have started FF14 sooner, only that I didn't want to begin a big MMO directly before a new Monster Hunter game. But thinking back on that now though, it's a shame that I missed out on the Heavensward experience because I didn't end up liking Monster Hunter World, and so I started FF14 only 3 weeks after World released, but that's all a tale for another day. So with that said, if you're one of my usual Monster Hunter viewers who are still listening, and you haven't played FF14, then please do. I cannot recommend this game enough, especially with its free trial, that I'll spare everyone from me repeating that copypasta. But that free trial has easily hundreds of hours of content in it that you can play entirely for free at your own pace. And if you play it to the end, then you can do the Monster Hunter World collab and farm the Rathalos for his armor and his mount. So that'll be my Monster Hunter quota for the video met. And now I'm going to give a huge spoiler warning. From this point onwards, for all of FF14 up to patch 6.55. I'll give you a few more seconds to let that sink in. Seriously, let that sink inside, do not leave it out there, okay? Last call for the spoiler warning, alright? I think that's enough time, so let me begin. I'm going to start with the MSQ first, since that's where we all had to start with FF14, making it only a fitting point for the video.
And so you venture forth unto the unknown.
And Endwalker's story is nothing but incredible. Seriously, hats off to Creative Business Division Unit 3, which is a massive name I'm not going to repeat from this point onwards, it's just going to be CB3. But seriously, hats off for landing such a satisfying ending to an MMO of all bloody things. I'm not going to cover every section bit by bit here because that'll take far too long, and I also played Endwalker a couple years ago, so I don't remember everything crystal clear. What I am going to do instead is talk about, or knowing what I'm like, I'm going to be rambling on about my favourite moments from Endwalker's story that really stood out to me. And these were the Xenoblade Contingent, or the Garlemald chapter, whichever you like to call it, the Final Days, Meeting Meteon, and Ultima Fall. I think those are the big hitters, at least in my eyes, and this way I'm balancing a major plot point from each act of the Endwalker story, so I like that. And starting with the Xenoblade Contingent, the whole Garlemald section of the game was just... it was something else. Ever since the end of Stormblood, no, even before the end of Stormblood, Garlemald was made out to be the big bad evil force we'd be fighting at the end of the game. And I thought the expansion that ended up being Shadowbringers would have had us pushing into Xenoblade and finally getting that hammer class I've been teasing since our Realm Reborn, and especially during that Stormblood main scenario. But no, it ended up as an isekai with no playable hammer class. Curse the 12, why do you do this to me? So back to the Xenoblade Contingent. When we finally get to Garlemald and Endwalker, it's not like a big conquest war kind of thing. This place is already wrecked, it's torn apart, it's terrible, and the people are deep in the pits of despair. We didn't go there to conquer and kill them and get revenge for what they've done to us in all the prior expansions. We go there to help them. and it's such a tonal whiplash from what I was imagining after mainly the Stormblood main scenario, and also the Grimlet Dark Dungeon, which is my favourite FF14 dungeon by the way. I didn't expect this. Like, I just wanted to fight things, but instead this whole chapter is a depressing but beautiful look into the tragedy that is war, rather than just glorifying it. I love it! This is without question my favourite moment of Endwalker. The story here really makes you feel like the monster because everyone is scared shitless of us, and for good reason, which gets explored as the quest progresses through the zone. There's so much to unpack in this chapter that I do not want to get deep into it because I already know this is going to be a long video, so I'll try to briefly run through my favourite moments, like our first contact with the local civilians that got off to a bad start, as I expected it would, but I wasn't expecting it to go all the way where it did with those two poor women who ran away in the snowstorm and ended up dying because they'd rather not be around the party out of fear of us.
Safer to brave the wilds than trust in our magic.
Like, shit, that is so fucked up. Also, when the Legatus bloke says don't bother putting a shock collar on the Warrior of Light because it won't stop them anyway, and seeing the fear that statement puts on everyone in the scene, and again later in that same area, you're confronted by a soldier who survived your attack on the Praetorium during A Realm Reborn hundreds of hours earlier in the story, who hates the ever-living shit out of us. I was seriously taken back at how the WoLs' actions have serious consequences, and the reputation that brought here, it blew me away. I'm going to repeat myself again and say this wasn't how I expected my visit to Garlemald going, but I much prefer this approach over the war I originally wanted when I wanted to come here. It's also here that we first meet Euless, and I love Euless. He's such an amazing character who I wish he would have joined the main cast after Endwalker instead of Zero. I wanted then, and I still do now, more diversity in the main cast since we have 4 Elizons, 2 Makotes, 2 Lullafels, and 1 human. Like, where's the Auras and the Vieras? Why couldn't Euless join us and rep the Garleans? It's a shame. Anyways, I'm going to skip ahead to the one moment of joy we get in this chapter when both factions set aside their differences and come together for what is one of the best scenes in this expansion.
Here.
When that Alamegan soldier passed the soup over to Euless, after all the struggles both of them had been through, I started to shed tears. This was an incredibly heartwarming scene that had hit at just the right time after coming off of 5 hours of grief. The fact that Alamegan soldier here had spent about 20 years of his life or so suffering under Garlean rule, but looked past all of the Garleans' wrongdoings to come to their aid and offer Euless kindness when he needed it the most. It was beautiful.
It's the little things that make life worth living, don't you think?
I love the writing in this game. Coming not long after that heartfelt moment, like literally in the exact same cutscene, they switch it up and we immediately get the Xenos dinner sequence, and that whole solo instance that followed it was bloody awesome. I mentioned before about how much of a monster the Garleans make you feel, and if their words wasn't enough then now we are forced into the body of an average everyday soldier and get to experience how powerless they truly are. Those enemies I used to tear apart in groups of 20 during dungeons, here I had to run away from because I'm not strong enough to take on even one of them on its own. This instance really drives home the power difference between your character and the everyday man, and why the Garleans are so afraid of the Warrior of Light and all the people around him who have access to magic. It's brilliant storytelling through gameplay that had me shitting myself looking around every turn trying to avoid the battles I otherwise love to run into. I'm going to take a huge step back here for a quick minute to the gathering of the contingency in Alamigo. This is where my only complaint for the whole chapter lies, because prior to Endwalker, Yoshi P mentioned we should go and complete all of the class and job quests before starting the Endwalker story, which is something I did, and it wasn't hard for me to do either since I already had every job at level 80. I just didn't do any of the class quests for any of the jobs I don't main. But after I finished them, and I did play Endwalker, I didn't feel any huge payoff for doing that. Like, aside from the Easelbard contingent, where like a few of the minor job NPCs appear and have a little bit of dialogue, everyone else, if everyone else even appears at all, is in the background of a cutscene for a couple seconds. Like the very first cutscene of Endwalker, you see Jackie from the Rogues Guild walking along the dock. Or during the beginning of the final days, you see the Red Mage bloke who, I forget his name, but you see his feet walk through the Alamegan Quarter. And yeah, I was just disappointed. I was hoping at least that in the role quest that your job NPCs would show up to help you out, but nah, they didn't get any sweet cameos like that there either. I'll talk more about the role quest later. I just wanted to say that I was expecting a lot more from that comment. I wished everyone was here like in Smash Ultimate. Though I suppose assembling the Avengers to go on what is essentially just a relief mission is kinda pointless, you know, it wouldn't really work. Anyway, after the whole Garlemald chapter ends, we're immediately whisked away to the moon to defeat Zodiac, and what a ballsy fucking move that was. I made a joke to my mate who was like a cutscene behind me here saying I'm already at the end of the game, what's taken him so long, because ever since the end of the base of, I think, Heavensward main scenario, I'm pretty sure that's when they started teasing Zodiac as being the big bad final boss of FF14. So people who were around back then had 7 years and like hundreds of hours of story to go through expecting to fight Zodiac at the end of the game, but here he is now, as the first major boss of the expansion. And when you beat him, he's actually dead. You defeat Zodiac then and there, he is done. So now there's like another 30 hours of story quest to go. And I was baffled, like where does the story go from here? And where it went is somewhere that I expect nobody was predicting. Like, Endwalker as a whole is filled with 180 turns where you expect it to go someplace, but it goes in the complete opposite direction and all of them land. It is incredible. And so this plot point leads directly into the final days, and at risk of drawing the ire of the FF14 community if I haven't already, I personally feel the final days didn't go far enough. I think it was Yoshi P who in an interview stated that Endwalker was originally planned to be 2 different expansions, but they decided to bundle it all together just to get it done and out there, and I feel like the Final Days situation is where we really felt that squish the most. The Final Days were meant to be a massive world-ending event, and yet we only see it happen in Favnir and Garlemald. When you go do the role quest, you see the Final Days are occurring as far west as Dravania and as far east as Orphan, but you don't see the whole end-of-the-world apocalypse sky phenomenon that precedes the Blasphemies. You can also do these role quests after stopping the Final Days too, which makes seeing people turn into Blasphemies after the fact kinda funny. So yeah, that's the time bubble shenanigans at play there. Like, I just wanted to go back to Uldar or any of the other starting locations and see the sky burning to really get that feeling that this is the end of the bloody world. The devs wouldn't have to go back and change the monsters in the overworld. I mean, they didn't do that in Favnir either, and that part landed just fine. But like, just add the weather effect of the Final Days everywhere on the source for the players at that part of the story, similar to how the Unending Light worked in Shadowbringers. Is that selfish to say? Probably, yeah, maybe. What we did see of the Final Days in Favnir was great. It's horrifying as hell. Like, the intro cutscene with all the monsters going around slaughtering people, or the people turning into monsters themselves, that was terrifying. I loved it. Like, the horror of it all, not the people suffering of course. Seeing Favnir, which until now was a beautiful tropical island with a rainbow colour scheme, and had that happy, upbeat, funky backing track, now shaded in dark red from the crimson skies to the burning treelands, crawling with monsters everywhere, and that daunting music playing in the background, which actually made fate farming during this part of the story very fun. But it's literally the end of the world, and I wish we got more of this elsewhere, other than just Garlemald a bit later in the story. Which I must say, that scene when the Imperial Army came to our aid during the big battle with the Blasphemies, that was awesome. Moving along now over to the Twitter Jezzychii Meteon. We all know now that she is the main villain, but here at the start of Elpis we had no idea really where the story was going to go with her. But as soon as she appeared in that first cutscene, I immediately liked her because she looked just like one of the Hyentia from the Xenoblade games. While that scene was playing, I'm pretty sure I physically sat up and pointed at the TV like that one Leonardo DiCaprio meme and exclaimed, "Hey, that's a Hyentia!" My favourite characters from Xenoblade 1 and 3 are Hyentia, Like, I just got an affinity for the burb girls, what else can I say? Also, funny enough, this Xenoblade connection came around full circle when the expansion to Xenoblade Chronicles 3 released, with Meteon's English voice actor voicing one of the main cast in that game, which I then ended up liking because she had the same voice actor as Meteon, who I liked because she looked like a Xenoblade character in the first place. Just wild.
May we please be friends?
Sleeping on the ground. I've never seen anyone make it look quite so comfortable. I worry.
Later on during Elpis, towards the end where the party confronts Hermes about Meteon, that part actually scared the living shit out of me when Meteon snapped into radio mode and started talking about aliens. In real life, I like to believe that aliens could be out there, and the thought of that is something that I find equal parts fascinating as I do terrifying. So when I saw Meteon connecting to some extraterrestrial entity, and it clicking with me that they are responsible for what's happening with the final days, I was all kinds of shook and mind blown at the same time. Like, damn, the writers at CB3 are really out here at the 11th hour changing the villain of their 10-year story from a well-established primal god to fucking aliens of all things. And it all just works somehow. I fucking love this game. But later in the story, we do discover it's not actually aliens, but the collected despair of aliens that leads Meteon and her sisters to wanting to end everything. Regardless though, that doesn't change how truly terrified I was for the half an hour that follows, nor the balls in the writer's room it took to pull this off and have it work as well as it does. And thus, after several more hours of questing, we arrive in Ultima Fall in pursuit of Meteon. But first I want to give a shout out to that one Orioge hugging cutscene. That was another moment that had me tearing up. So Ultima Fall is an amazing last zone, from the literally out of this world visuals to the music that evolves as you progress through the zone. Everything here just screams the last level of a JRPG, which, even though this is an MMO, it's still a Final Fantasy game, and this is still the end of FF14, at least its 10-year story. And yes, I cried here. A lot. I'm sure everyone did. While I was running through this zone, I was kind of metagaming a little, knowing the Scions weren't actually going to stay dead, because we still had a dungeon by the end of this area that needed them as trust allies. But I know some people didn't think that, like my mate who I've run through all of FF14 with since we started in ARR together, and later he said the cop-out deaths felt cheap when they get brought back after sacrificing themselves, and I feel that kind of misses the point. I was looking at this from the perspective that these characters are sacrificing themselves with the knowledge that they're probably not coming back after this. That they believe wholeheartedly in you, and that they're willing to sacrifice everything they have so that you can make it to the end, so that you can save everything they love. And that's what really fucked me up. What finally broke me completely here in Ultima 4 was when Groha's time came to sacrifice himself, and Alize, on the verge of tears like I was in real life, asks him, "Why can't you just stay with us for one adventure?"
You idiot! Just once, stay with us to the end!
Like, fuck, that is a raw line right there. And at the same time she's asking it, the vocals for Close in the Distance finally kick in, with the full theme playing for the first time, and oh man, I had to set the controller down then and there and grab tissues because I wept like a bitch for almost 10 minutes straight listening to that song play. Close in the Distance is truly the song of all time. And IRL too, I had to get ready for a fishing meet I was supposed to be at shortly, so that was a long 4-hour pause from FF14 before I could continue the rest of the MSQ, while at the same time making excuses for why my eyes were red because I was too embarrassed to tell anyone there I was sobbing over a video game. So then when I came back, I'm forced to watch the twins sacrifice themselves after I promised their mum I'll keep them safe, and then I get into the Endwalk sequence, which is probably one of the best things I've ever seen in a video game, or from what little I could see amidst the tears. It's just... this is the best game ever. This is the best Final Fantasy game ever. I love Final Fantasy XIV. This is perfect. So, I'm going to jump over now to Xenos with a hot take that, if I haven't pissed off the FF14 fans already, which I'm not trying to do mind you, I'm just sharing my opinions here. But if anything will set them off, and this probably will, because I like Xenos. I think he's a cool villain. He just wants to kill shit, which is fine. And I think the reason people hate Xenos is because basically every other villain in Final Fantasy XIV is built up with such a deep backstory that having a bloke who just wants to fight you for the sake of it is considered weak sauce next to the sad, depressing stories of Emmett Silk and Elidibus, or like, even Gaius, who from all the way back in A Realm Reborn had very little characterization, but comes back in Stormblood with a redemption arc, and later gives him a family to watch die in Shadowbringers. I don't think everyone needs a complex reason to justify the evil shit they do so we can sympathize with them. Sometimes you've just gotta have evil pricks that do bad things because they like being bad. And also, Xenos turning into Shinryu to Adis, that was cool. I mentioned I started in Stormblood, so seeing this throwback to the final boss of the expansion I started with, it was awesome. I do wish though that he did a bit more in the trial fight against the Endsinger though, like swing his tail or something else similar to what he does in the level 70 Shinryu fight. But even without any of that, the final day was an amazing final trial, and I especially loved that duel with him at the end of it.
Hear me then. Not as a hero, but as simply you. Such pleasures you seek for their own sake, and no other reason. Is this not so, adventurer?
When he sits there and addresses you, not as a hero, but as an adventurer, that really connected with me because I feel like a lot of people, and understandably so, misinterpret the Warrior of Light as being a grand hero savior, which is what the entirety of Shadowbringers and Endwalker was railroading people into acting like. But every Warrior of Light started FF14 as an adventurer before becoming that hero later on, and the game has countless times tried to remind players that you are an adventurer.
After all, we were adventurers before we were scions, were we not?
One of my favourite parts of Stormblood was the patch 4.1 story where you and your bros Alphino and Arenvald go on an adventure to just kill shit and find treasure like an adventurer does. So I had always seen my character as an adventurer who just wants to fight stuff. And I'm not saying that because I have WoW brain. I have never played World of Warcraft. I am a Final Fantasy gamer. I started with Final Fantasy VI when I was a kid. I loved that game. It was my favourite Final Fantasy before I played 14. And then I would later jump from 6 to 9, and I played every mainline FF game from that, apart from 11, which is not to mention the many spin-off titles I've played as well. So yeah, as an FF fan, I loved the Xenos fight, and I don't think it was out of character for us to do. Xenos wasn't addressing you, the player, which many people think. It was just you who forgot what the Warrior of Light really was. Anyways, sorry if that comes off lecturing. It was a badass fight, and also an epic way to end an MMO with a solo instance boss fight. But as I always say, 14's an FFRPG and an MMO second. I'm also a firm subscriber to the Xenos saved the wall at the end theory. I love it. And I love Endwalker. So that's been my ramblings on the MSQ stuff, all of a few points I wanted to discuss, and bloody hell, this is going to be a long video, and longer than my usual content, and I've hardly gone through a third of the dot points I've listed here to talk about. I also would have liked to have ran through a New Game Plus playthrough to better refresh my memory and get better footage to show here. However, I didn't have the time due to all the Monster Hunter news that's come out over the past month that I wanted to make videos on first during my free time from work and other real life commitments. Anyways, I still have a lot to go through, so bear with me here because now I'm moving on to my extremely mixed feelings about the post-Endwalker patch story. So 6.1 had a lot riding on it, with it being the start of a new adventure with our previous 10-year main storyline finished. And I thought 6.1 was bloody awesome. Like, I had just mentioned a few minutes ago how I loved the patch 4.1 story, and that's literally what happens here again in 6.1, with Estedian directly citing that as his inspiration for doing what we're doing here.
I hope to do for Thavnir what you and Alphino did for the Alamegans when you recovered the Mad King's trove.
The new dungeon as well became one of my favourites. It literally feels like a Jak and Daxter level, not just in the way it looks but also the music. I was hit with a double dose of nostalgia for both that and Stormblood, and I was riding that high all patch. The new drip we got from Totaro was bloody cool too. After modifying the leg pieces, that became my main Glamour since 6.1 dropped, and I'm not planning to change it for Dawntrail. The Glamour fits perfectly with the theme of our newfound adventure, but what it doesn't really fit though is the Void stuff. I do not like the Void stuff. As soon as we got to patch 6.2, I immediately stopped vibing with the MSQ because I have not played Final Fantasy XIV, nor did I like Zero's character. I found her honestly boring. I didn't see anything charming in her at first, which I know now was kinda the point. She's meant to develop emotions as she goes through the patch quests, but these patches came out so slow, and the whole time I was running through these quests alongside her, I was thinking back to the Shadowbringers role quests and how we already had a colourful cast of better characters there who were going to save the Void first before Zero. Like, you have two characters from the 13th right there already, one of them who's been around since Heavensward, and the rest are semi-required for Shadowbringers MSQ, so you already know at least one of them. And this is a wholly separate party from the Scions, which means we could have given the old main cast a proper break moving into this new adventure. Granted, most of this was optional content, so I wouldn't know how CB3 would go about incorporating the Void Quest and the Patrons of the Wandering Stairs into the MSQ. So that whole plotline is kind of wrapped in a mess, which it only gets one reference in the MSQ after completing the 6.1 dungeon. And most egregious of all, when you take Zero to the first in 6.5, she does not have any dialogue with them. What a huge missed opportunity there. I was so bloody tilted. And for the rest of the story, I have no nostalgia for Final Fantasy IV, and the following patch content of Endwalker being loaded with FF4 references didn't help with this disconnect. I was not enjoying what I was playing anymore. Final Fantasy XIV was usually pretty good with referencing the older FF games and making it fit into the lore of 14 in a way that doesn't really feel intrusive. Like the Crystal Tower raids with Free and the Warring Triad for 6, as a couple of examples. I thought the references to FF4 already in Endwalker, like Bestway's Burrow and the trailer guy swapping from Dark Knight to Paladin was fine, but I did not like how far the story leaned into FF4 from patches 6.2 to 6.5. What made this feel even worse was I came off an incredible high that was patch 6.1 and the end of base Endwalker with its satisfying conclusion, and now I'm moving into a story that I didn't like anymore. And with many of my mates leaving the game around this time too, and my FC falling apart because of a different reason, I didn't feel like continuing FF14 from 6.3 onwards. So I decided it's finally time to play the Legends of Heroes Trails in the... Nope, actually, 14's more than just story, so it's time to talk about Endwalker's MMO contents. First up, the new classes. I didn't really play them. I might not have the WoW brain, but I do have the RuneScape brain, so I love leveling everything to max, but that's not something I did this time with Reaper and Sage and half of my crafters, with them being stuck between levels to 80 to 90. I just fell off the game and I couldn't really bother with them. My main jobs, for those who are curious, have been Dark Knight and Monk. However, I find Dark Knight to be boring as fuck now since it was ruined in Shadowbringers. With Endwalker doing nothing to help that feeling, I finally dropped my Greatsword for a Great Axe with Warrior, and I have been having a blast on that job, and I plan to main this through Dawntrail. So since I've been talking a lot about role quests and jobs here, I think it's time to share my thoughts on the Endwalker role quests. And I loved almost all of them. The only one I didn't like was the tank role quests, and tank is my main role, so that was disappointing. I just don't find Cunny Senna that interesting of a character, and like the whole Elemental Spirit of the Trees plotline was so boring. This is something I would imagine be more fitting for the healer role quests, and if it was healer then I'd be more accepting of it, but to make it about tanks, like why? Gridania doesn't even have any tank jobs. No, I am not including Gunbreaker as being a Gridanian tank job. Most of its quests are literally everywhere else but in Gridania. But the other role quests though, especially the healer role quest, just perfection. Those healer role quests I fully believe should have been main scenario in all honesty. And I imagine these role quest stories possibly were considered as main scenario before the 2 expansions got merged into just Endwalker. The plotline in the healer role quests with Fadola and Arenvald, Radaban, Pippin and Nanamo was crazy good. And it's put all into an optional side quest. Like, why? This is a huge story that deserved the proper MSQ treatment, like voice acting. Another one that I really loved was the ranged physical DPS role quest because, well, I love Yugiri. Yugiri is my Final Fantasy XIV waifu, I'll say it, and anything involving her is a good story in my eyes. But beyond just her being there, seeing Gozetsu back and as a healer of all things was cool. I love how his character arc has been handled since Stormblood. Next is the melee DPS quest, and I bloody loved these since out of all the things that could have happened in Limsa, we decide to assemble the company of heroes, and at first when I saw that line the wall could say in the cutscene, I was like, the who? But then it turns out to be the correct option, and I later see that these are the goofs that we met in early ARR when we're getting ready to fight Titan. They made us fetch cheese from a dragon in a level 30 dungeon. How could have I forgotten them, seriously? These quests are surprisingly solid too, all jokes aside. I rate the melee as my second favourite of the lot after the healer role quests. And then the magical DPS, which I'll say is about Ishgard, and anything Ishgard I am a sucker for. Heavensward is my favourite expansion, so I loved coming back here for this. Lastly is the unified role quest, which was another opportunity for Nero to flex he has the God Eater boost hammer and I still don't, so bugger off mate, don't come back until you're my job quest NPC, hopefully in the next expansion. Alright, now for the raid series in Endwalker, which was Pandemonium. And I'm going to preface this by first saying, I don't run Extreme or Savage, so this is just from the perspective of a casual player. I used to run Savage content when I caught up to the endgame in Stormblood, and mind you, back then I was on the European data center, which, if you didn't know, I'm actually Australian, so I had nearly 2 whole seconds of server latency there. And with that BS handicap, I somehow still managed to clear all of the Omega raids on Savage difficulty, which is an accomplishment I love to flex. That was hard fucking core, let me tell ya. But going into Shadowbringers, I dropped doing Extreme and Savage content because they were very time consuming. There were other games coming out around that point that I wanted to play, and I was also starting my first job, so I didn't really have the time to dedicate several hours a day to clearing one fight like I used to. So from my casual point of view, I played this for the story and some fun fights, and I wasn't disappointed. Earlier in this video, I mentioned FF14 giving backstory to older villains, and that's what they did here again with La Habrea. I liked the Pandemonium story more towards the end than I did at the start once La Habrea was introduced. And also, I think this was the first time since ARR with the Coils of Bahamut that we've had actual voice cutscenes and optional quests, which surprised me a lot when I seen it. I'm hoping this was a prelude to more voiced content in Dawntrail, because I love voice acting, I just don't want to have to read everything, I'm a bit lazy like that. Fight-wise, most of these were fun, and every single tier had banging music, which is always a win in my book. If I had to pick my favourite fight from each set, it would be Dracula, the Wise Mythical Tree, and Madama Butterfly. Now, Myths of the Realm, Endwalker's Alliance raids. These were my favourite piece of optional content in this expansion. 4 reasons. I love that these quests are solely focused on FF14's lore by exploring who actually are the 12, which is something that Gaius makes me question on a weekly basis. Biogot also makes me question why he's allowed to have nipples and not me, but anyway. My favourite of these raids was the second one, Euphorino Sign, which I might have not pronounced right. But I liked this one for 2 massive reasons. The first reason being the standard battle theme called Rhythm of the Realm that plays during the breast boss fights in this raid. I am a sucker for hard strings and music, and the fiddle going ham during this song perfectly hits that for me. And the second reason is Nothica. Oh, and Harlone of course, who is my character's deity. She's here. My god, it is so hard to stay faithful to her when those Nothicas are around. These were a stellar set of raids, from the fights to the music, everything was top notch, making these my favourite Alliance raids in 14 by far, but only because the Bozja special engagements don't count as Alliance raids. Going off on a little side tangent here, I wonder if this raid series being solely FF14 focused was to make up for those shitty near tie-in raids we got in Shadowbringers. I hate those raids, like, don't get me wrong, the encounters were fun, but the story made no fucking sense. The story in the Nier games never make any sense, and the fact Yoko Taro scatters what little there is across a dozen different forms of media really ticks me off. Like, I give FF15 a lot of slack. Everyone gives 15 a lot of slack, and understandably so, for its story being split across an anime, a movie, and a book, instead of just the one game. But when Yoko Taro does it, he gets a free pass, and is even praised for doing it. I hate double standards. We only got one expansion on the first so far, and we wasted a major piece of storytelling content on a tie-in collaboration raid, which gave little to no story honestly for either the first or Nier during the brief bit of time we were isekai'd to the first. That frustrates me, but this video isn't about Shadowbringers, so I'm going to drop the topic. Actually, no, I can rope this back around into Endwalker by mentioning how I love that CB3 Fervor made up for this with the Crafter Relic quest being focused around the Crystalline Mean. But like, I didn't do those, I hate crafting. And then there's also the custom deliveries, which I have custom deliveries written down here as a later talking point, but I may as well just talk about them now since I'm here. So on the first, there's also this Leaf Man in Lil Meg, who I actually had just started his story last week alongside the lady in Labyrinthos, meaning I don't have much to comment on with them. I like the concept of their story from their introduction, which is nice, but since I'm only recently catching up on content after falling off in 6.3, I won't be finished with either of these two until the first month of Dawntrail. But I did complete the Emilion's quests that were already released while I was still actively playing the game. And this was a sweet story about a parental figure trying to care for a struggling child, and it rewarded me with a sweet drip and easy crafter level, so gold stars. I find it fascinating that the most mundane jobs in FF14 like the crafters and gatherers have such deep stories tied to it. I often look back at how crazy the level 60 minor quests in Heavensward were, where like, you've got a band of just random mercenaries who have their own separate drama going on that plays out while you collect rocks. That's the quest objective. Every quest is just collect rocks. You've got the most bloody insane stories happening here while I'm on the sideline collecting rocks. You know, saying this, perhaps I should stop slacking off on the crafter rogue quests over the last two expansions. I bet they're just as entertaining to clear. My original next talking point was about the Beast Tribes, which, like the custom deliveries, I've only cleared 1 out of the 3. The tribe I finished were the Elephant Peoples because it was the first tribe of the expansion back when, again, I was actively playing. I don't have much to say about them, you know, it's just your typical kind of Beast Tribe stuff we've had since ARR. I thought the story was serviceable, which is my standard opinion on Beast Tribes. But the Omnicrons on the other hand. I think the Omnicrons are the best Beast Tribe we've ever had, or... Hang on. I should be calling these tribal quests now, right? I'm being a bit racist here, my apologies. So the Omnicrons, with their story about finding hope in literally the place where despair itself made manifest, alongside all the other people that Meteon met during their final days, it's fascinating to me. I'm looking forward to getting around and actually finishing these quests to learn more about these races, because I find the whole space sci-fi side of FF14 super interesting, and I'm keen to see more of it with the cosmic exploration in Dawntrail. And then as for the Lopperates, well, they're just doing a thing. I don't really like the Lopperates. I thought they were really silly filler content after we felled Zodiac in the MSQ, but they're our crafter quests, and they're how I cheese XP on these crafters, so they're getting done for that reason. I also hate how the crafter beast tribes always have the most annoying unlocked prerequisite conditions, like sheesh, crafting's boring enough already as it is. I also want to share my thoughts on some interesting side quests that I've done that were optional, and they're not marked as being important kind of optional, but believe me, these are important. These are essential, non-essential quests for Endwalker in my opinion. The first one was the Omega and the Omicron quest, which I forgot a lot of since I did these 2 years ago when it came out. I also couldn't find the cutscenes in the Unending Journey to rewatch like I did some of the other quests here, so I have nothing else to say other than I remember loving this side quest for much the same reason I loved the Omicron's Tribal Quest. The other essential non-essential quest was Tataru's Grand Endeavor, which I only had just finished literally like the other night before I started doing the recording stuff for this video. I thought that first quest in this chain, which I did back when it first came out, was kind of weak because I thought the whole point of these quests were to shine a spotlight on those who were in the background of Endwalker's MSQ but didn't really get the main spotlight. Which was a lie because the first quest has you go speaking to the 3 starting city-state leaders of the Easelbard contingent, who got plenty of bloody spotlight during the Garlemald arc of Endwalker. Thankfully for me, in the following quest it does go over some important background characters with the Red Bills, the Four Lords, and Gaius Van Belsa himself. These 3 quests were really good. My favourite one was the Red Bill quest because I love Heavensward. Seeing these zones again in cutscenes with the music, especially Dravania, that's my favourite area in all of FF14, was a nostalgic blast I thoroughly enjoyed. I reckon I'll do a New Game Plus run of Heavensward when the graphics update is out to properly relive this adventure like never before. And the Four Lords stuff, it was alright. I don't really like the Four Lords that much for admittedly a stupid reason, which is that when I got to the endgame in Stormblood, I swear every day when I ran the expert roulette, I got Hell's Lid and had to fight Genbu. I never wanted to see this stupid turtle again. Yes, it's a stupid reason, but it's still a reason. Then the second last Tataru quest with Gaius follows up on the Sorrows of Werlet, which was my favourite side quest in Shadowbringers. Mechas and feels. Say no more, I am sold. That questline had me in tears by the time I was done, which is exactly what happened here during my second round in Werlet for Tataru. The mech fight this time was literally a QuickTime event sequence, which I found extremely goofy to see a QuickTime event in FF14. I hope we get more mech fights in Dawntrail, like proper ones too, that'll be cool. And the family portrait scene here at the end, it hurt me. But I was happy to see Ali was recovering well after the shit she went through in the Shadowbringers Sorrows of Werlet quests. Honestly, Tataru's Grand Endeavor questline, it deserved a blue check marker quest. It was an extremely rewarding experience in both the story and the actual quest rewards. I loved them. That is all the content I liked in Endwalker. Now I've got 4 points here to talk about that I wasn't a huge fan of. Starting with the one that's going to piss a lot of people off, I didn't like the Hildebrand quests, mainly because it was our relic weapon series. I'm going to admit that's actually hypocritical of me to say though, given I've never fully completed a relic weapon until the Mandeville weapons because I didn't like the grind, but I almost completed my weapon in Shadowbringers because I found the Boja content a lot of bloody fun. And now in Endwalker, there is no exploratory zone, which blows. Making the weapons is as easy as just joining a hunt train and doing my weekly raid clears to earn the tomestones. It's stupid, there's nothing being added to the gameplay here. I'm already doing all of this anyway without needing the relic weapon incentives. I also don't find the Hildebrand quest that funny. I know that's wild to say. I'll admit there was a few laughs from me here in the Endwalker quests, which surprised me. It was mainly with the Hildebrand being introduced as a Light Warden, and then later the alien family tree reveal, but that's about all. The Endwalker Hildebrand quests were a lot better than the Heavensward and Stormblood ones, which I didn't find the slightest bit amusing. The most I laughed at Hildebrand was in the early ARR quest before the shock value of the gag questline wore off for me. Maybe it's because we didn't get any Hildebrand in Shadowbringers that I actually enjoyed the Endwalker quests a lot more. I kind of want to call this Relic series a waste of time, but it's really the opposite because we saved time here by not needing to grind any relics this expansion. This is the kind of stuff that led me to dropping off in patch 6.3 because I got really nothing to play here. Also, the variant dungeons. Why? Why would I want to play the same dungeon 12 times if it's not on a roulette for my dailies? Well, that's actually what I thought when I heard that these were a thing that was releasing. And it's what I thought until last week when I actually cleared a route of each of these variant dungeons. And I liked them for the most part, aside from Nanamo's dungeon, that's just a huge ugly sewer. However, one opinion I have about these that's never changing is why make these dungeons you need to finish 12 times and never do them again? There's no roulette, at least not yet, and given that the system kinda works similar to Blue Mage, then there might never be a roulette. So why make this? Who asked? Not me, because I've been advocating for hard mode dungeons to return ever since they were dropped in Shadowbringers. I loved the concept of returning to prior expansion dungeons to see what's changed since our last visit, and best of all, these were actually hard dungeons for the patch they were dropping in, making it so our expert roulette was an actual expert roulette, and not a bloody coin flip between a hard dungeon from this patch or the dungeon from the last patch we're now overgeared for. There's nothing expert about that. Why do we still have this as a roulette? Sorry to rant here, I just wanted to say that I felt like this was a waste of resources in my personal opinion that could have been spent on making actual hard mode dungeons and just adding the rewards to those instead. Like, remember when you got a mount in the Alamigo dungeon? That's never happened since, but you could have added the fat hamster thing from Nanamo's sewer dungeon to a hard mode version of the sewers or something, I don't know. Variant dungeons, they're just not my kind of thing. They're not the kind of long-form gameplay that I wanted, and even though I admit they're fun, for 12 runs, but I had a blast playing through these with only a warrior and a machinist, which was a stupid party formation. It was hard, but fuck me, it was all fun. I can see the appeal here, and I'm also hoping I'm wrong about these not being compatible for roulettes too. I'd happily run these once per day if it's on one, so I'm praying that we do get a roulette in Dawntrail. Hey g'day, I was midway through editing the video, and when I was looking at an OST video on YouTube, I discovered that Criterion dungeons are actual proper dungeons and not the silly 12 ending shit like variant dungeons are. These look like a lot of fun, and I plan to try them when I get back after maintenance is over and I've finished the Dawntrail story. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. Also, this doesn't actually change my opinion about not getting hard mode dungeons or just optional patch dungeons in general back, but I thought I'd just add this to the video because I don't want to be called out about not knowing this, so yeah. So up next is Island Sanctuary, which I have nothing to say. I didn't do this either. I didn't even start it for the video. I hate farming simulators. I've tried games like Animal Crossing and Rune Factory before. I've given them an honest shot, but they're just not my kind of thing. So when I saw FF14 was getting a farming simulator, I looked at this and I'm just like, I am never going to play this. My mate played it though, so I'm showing footage of his farm island in the background while I talk, but it looks the same as everyone else's island, so yeah, why am I even bothering to show this? I don't know. Next thing, Deep Dungeon. Again, I didn't do it because I don't like Deep Dungeon. I didn't like Palace of the Dead. In fact, I never even finished Palace of the Dead after I unlocked it until Endwalker released with a PSN achievement for collecting Triple Triad cards, which meant I had to finish this and Heaven on High, which I didn't like either, so I wasn't planning to do a third version themed around Eureka. And so, that's all the major pieces of Endwalker's content covered now. And you know what the best thing about Final Fantasy XIV is? This game has something for everyone. And even if I don't particularly like a part of that something, then, as Yoshi P has always made clear to his players, Final Fantasy XIV isn't a game you're supposed to log in and play forever. It's okay to take a break and do something else, and then come back when you feel like it without being punished. Which is exactly what I did, because I decided to go play The Legend of Heroes Trails, and no, actually, I decided to do what no sane person would ever do and begin replaying the entirety of Final Fantasy XIV again on an alternate character. Enter Morgan Amsworth, an old alt character I made during the tail end of Stormblood, who I used to test the waters over on the NA data centers before deciding it was appropriate to move my main Johannes there from EU before retiring her. I never touched this alt again. That was until FF14 really shot up in popularity during the later half of Shadowbringers, bringing the game to the attention of several mates who wanted to play, however they didn't want to play on the North American servers where I currently was. They eventually settled across the elemental worlds on a Japanese data center, and I wanted to play with them, but I certainly wasn't going to move my main character there because I have a house. I showed you my crib earlier. I had friends here, or at least I did at the time anyways, so I wasn't planning to move. But then I remembered I have a character midway through the Stormblood patch content I could transfer there, and thus a new Warrior of Light truly began her adventure. I wasn't expecting how much I'd actually love starting again from essentially nothing, because at this point I had spent over 6 years maxing out all of my jobs on my main character, maxing out all of the beast tribes, farming everything I ever wanted to farm. There was nothing new for me to do on my main character, and with the new content coming out I wasn't gelling with, but I still had the thirst to play FF14. I'd pop over to Morgan because here I have an entire 5 games worth of content to complete all over again, which to my surprise, playing through a second time was really enjoyable. And what made this experience even better was the people I met over on the Japanese data center. I already had several of my mates playing there, which was the reason I moved Morgan here in the first place, but I also met an incredible FC with the Heim family who, this is going to sound real corny, but I feel a better connection with than my actual main North American free company, which I've been a part of for the better half of 4 bloody years at this point. No shade to anyone there with me on NA, if you're listening to this, like, I'm still there doing my thing. If I hated you, I'd leave, which I don't, so do not worry. But Heim's just so much more active and always fun to be around. They do heaps of FC event stuff that I skip most of the time for other commitments, but I love the effort our leader puts into it. I always make sure to attend the major events though, like here I'm showing footage of their annual Kagagui Sakura festival, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, where they decked out half of a housing ward with other venue booths, smaller stalls, and a main stage which has hosts and performers speaking over a Discord stage voice chat thing to everyone in the audience. The venues in North America do not compete with this. Well, at least not on Crystal from what I've seen, and I used to move around there a lot. Heim's got much more like this coming soon, like their big summer bash or the next Pokemon themed Minion Championship, so if full data center visit is out by then, I encourage you to come join in on the fun. If you're someone who has watched my past videos and I haven't managed to filter you out yet, then this is where I met Alicia, who's appeared in quite a few of my other videos. I love playing this character. I have been having so much more fun here than I do back on my main that I'm not even sure I can call Morgan an alt anymore, because over the course of Endwalker, I have spent far more time playing her than I have Brixie. Also, it's on Morgan I was playing Reaper and Sage. I mean, I haven't even bothered unlocking Sage on my first character, it's all Morgan, baby. Come Dawntrail though, I'll be back on my main character, for whatever that's worth saying at this point, to play the MSQ, re-level everything or finish leveling what I haven't yet, and then I'll be back on Morgan to keep doing it all over again. Or at least until I get burnt out, because let me tell you, trying to keep 2 characters geared and farming the end game, it is a second job. Not as bad as playing Gent shit Impact, but it's close. I ended up burning myself out on FF14 playing it like this, and so I finally went ahead and I played The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky. Anyways, that's like all I've really got to say about Endwalker, which was a lot. I'm not sure I'll have this video finished before Dawntrail, as early access drops in 3 days as of recording this, but I'm looking forward to Dawntrail because it seems like a really promising expansion. The big elephant in the room would be the graphics update, which I'm not someone who holds graphics as the most important part of a game, but I'd be lying if I said this isn't something I'm excited about seeing. I already think Final Fantasy XIV looks fine as it is now, and if it looks even better then hell yeah! If only PSO2 when it got its shit sequel had updated the base game with the NGS graphics like FF14 is doing with Dawntrail. Fuck New Genesis. Anyway, all the content they've announced so far for Dawntrail sounds good. Like, I complained about there being no exploratory zone, no Eureka, no Boja. Well, now it's coming back. I also mentioned how I don't like crafting that much, and now they're bringing back lifestyle content similar to the Ishgard Restoration, which was a system that I absolutely loved. I ran a link pearl during Shadowbringers for Qual's Ishgard Restoration project. It was fun to be a part of that. I even set alarms to go off at 4 in the morning so I could wake up and do the crafting phase. Like, I was dedicated to the cause. I had to fix that city. And I'm excited to do that all over again by building some kind of space city or something. I don't know. It's cosmic exploration in Dawntrail. I'm psyched. This is the kind of content I can get behind. I'm looking forward to this, on top of all the other stuff they've already introduced as standard in the current expansion coming back for more in Dawntrail. I haven't really said much about the story yet, which just screams adventure with a tad bit of Tales of Xillia based off that launch trailer, so it's cool, I can't wait. But I'll be spending my launch night grinding my Fisher to level 100, so it'll have to wait a little bit. And speaking of waiting a little bit, I mentioned several times this little gag about starting Trails in the Sky earlier. Well, I've actually started that last July and I've been playing through all of the series, and now with Trails Through Daybreak releasing just a couple days after Dawntrail, I'm gonna have to wait to play that, which I would have had to have waited anyways because I still haven't played Reverie yet. I'm going to get around with that, I've just been so busy, but yeah. Man, I'm looking at this audio length and it's at 1 hour and 11 minutes prior to me editing out all the bad text, so I can already tell this is going to be a monster of a video. Speaking of monster, if you're someone who has subscribed to me for my Monster Hunter content, or not subscribed at all and just clicked on it for Final Fantasy XIV, but you like Monster Hunter, well, my next video that I want to try and put out, no promises, but I'm going to be covering Switch Axe, which will be similar to my video on Hammer. So watch that too if you haven't, please. It is my favourite video I've made so far. And subscribe anyway, since I want to do more Final Fantasy XIV videos in the future. And shorter ones at that. Well, thanks for listening if you've made it to the end. Your support goes a long way with helping me grow, so please consider liking the video if you liked it, or dislike it if you didn't. I'm open to dialogue in the comments, so please share whatever you want to say about Endwalker with me, or what I've said in the video, which I already forgot most of. And subscribe for more content like this. Alright, that's all. Have a good one, people. Cheers.